The traces of the past are still visible today. Well, at least that applies to those cases in which we also succeed in uncovering those very traces. Who knows how many historical mysteries are still waiting to be uncovered? Every time archaeologists unearth an ancient artifact from the Earth, there's great excitement among the scientific community. It's particularly spectacular when the discovery is not just an ordinary everyday object, but the remains of a full-grown city. The history of the ancient Egyptian port city of Heraklion is a prime example of an ancient metropolis that was thought to have been lost for centuries and was finally able to be added to modern maps. No less mysterious are the stories about the gigantic cities that are said to still slumber in the heart of the jungle or in the depths of the sea. Though these lost places are often little more than vague rumors, some daredevil adventurers have taken it upon themselves to bring the myths and legends back to reality. Some explorers would pay a high price for their efforts and never return home. In fact, it's not always clear what fate befell these real Indiana Joneses and whether they succeeded in achieving their goals. However, the legacy of these daring adventurers lives on to this day, and these are their stories. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button and ring the notification bell to stay up to date with our future uploads. Also, stick around until the end to learn about one of the most incredible discoveries regarding this lost city. Alfred Isaac Middleton. Has the British Alfred Middleton really managed to track down a lost city in the jungle? How authentic are the images of this legendary town that have been circulating the internet for quite some time? These fundamental questions still cause heated debates. According to an old Smithsonian Magazine report, a former assistant to Arthur Conan Doyle was in possession of an exciting collection of documents dealing with the life of the British adventurer. According to this, the mysterious explorer was on the hunt for the lost city of Dawley II in the 19th century. This lost metropolis is said to be hiding somewhere on the way to a lake called Lop Nor, formerly one of the largest salt lakes in the world with no outflow. The former waters in the Tarim Basin have now completely dried up. It's said that Middleton got lost on the way to the lake and unexpectedly found himself in the impenetrable thicket of the jungle. In the notes of Doyle's assistants, there's also talk of a sparkling pot of gold that the Briton is said to have discovered hidden in a casket. It says in detail, a jungle town called Dawley II was allegedly found on the mission. According to Middleton, there was a map with a golden city that reached down to a lake and a golden statue of a woman who came from a lost continent called Atlantis. Middleton sent a group of people to find the town, and one of the men reportedly found a buried casket full of gold. Later, Middleton got lost in the jungle and was captured by a group of men who wanted the gold and the statue. He apparently died in captivity. So much for the disputed records. As if that weren't enough, it's said that one John Hargreaves, second in command of the mission, later tracked down the treasure that Middleton had discovered. But how is this exciting story to be classified? Most historians are not convinced of the veracity of the reports. Accordingly, the expedition to the lost city of Dawley II never took place. Others, however, believe the Brit was actually embarking on an exciting adventure from which he would never return. Percy Fawcett. At the beginning of the 20th century, British explorer Percy Fawcett heard a compelling story, the legend of the lost city of Z. In the thick of the Amazon rainforest, Fawcett learned from a chief of the Nambi-Quara Indians that the ruins of the legendary stone city lay dormant on a plain in the Mato Grosso. Enclosed by dense jungle and high mountains, the village would have deep moats, massive statues, and cobbled streets. However, the city is still not deserted. It's guarded by the warriors of the Suya tribe. As if this story wasn't exciting enough, gigantic unknown creatures are said to have been sighted around the city area. After the Brit first heard about this legend, he became almost obsessed with the city of Z, as he called it. To learn more about this mysterious place, the adventurer traveled to Rio de Janeiro after his expedition, where he trawled through some old documents from the state archives. Eventually, he came across an account of Portuguese sailors who had ventured inland in 1743 to prospect for gold and silver in the jungle. Instead of the sparkling treasures, however, the men stumbled upon a vast deserted city. Accordingly, the ruins would be hidden near the Rio Xingu River in the Mato Grosso region. After Fawcett studied the records, it was clear to him that the legend of the lost city of Z must have a core of truth. The seed that was then planted in the Briton's mind quickly blossomed into a burning passion. In every free minute, Fawcett kept looking for clues, coming up with his own theories and developing those of his colleagues. The adventurer was particularly taken with the stories about light-skinned Indians with red hair and blue eyes. In these people, Fawcett recognized the descendants of a sophisticated but now defunct civilization that once was called Z. The explorer thought highly of the ancient indigenous people, what he called Tapuyas. As he said in a speech to the Royal Geographic Society, the Tapuyas are as decent as the British. Her hands and feet are small and delicate. Their faces are of great beauty, and they have white, gold, and golden brown hair. They wore diamonds and ornaments made of jade. Fawcett later claims to have learned that the sunken city and its statues are made entirely of quartz, which is why it would later come to be known as the Crystal City. In the 1920s, the time had come. On his seventh South American expedition, the Brit finally wanted to track down the legendary place. Knowing that the native tribes responded more peacefully to small groups of travelers, he gathered only a small number of companions. In addition to his son Jack, only his friend Raleigh Rimmel, a photographer, should set off into the undergrowth of the rainforest. Before venturing into the great unknown, Fawcett left a short note for the Royal Geographic Society. There, he asked that no rescue teams be sent in the event of his disappearance, because the men would very likely meet the same fate. On April 20th, 1925, the three began their expedition. More than a month later, Fawcett telegraphed his wife Nina back home. The message said the two local leaders are now returning. They were becoming increasingly nervous. The group itself is now penetrating deeper into the land of the Indians. His wife need not fear that the expedition will fail. This was the explorer's last official sign of life. He has since been considered missing. The rescue attempts, which were launched against the expressed request of the Brit, all came to nothing. What became of Fawcett and his companions is uncertain. An official statement said the group was killed by hostile Indians. A few years later, however, rumors surfaced of an elderly, bearded man being held captive by Indian women who identified himself as a member of the British Army. In 1933, a so-called theodolite, that is, a special surveying instrument, was to be discovered from British equipment. Since the device was still in very good condition after all this time, Percy's widow Nina continued to believe that her husband and son were still alive. However, the true fate of the explorers remains unclear, just like the question of whether they might have succeeded in discovering the lost city of Z. El Dorado. Finally, let's take a quick look at the legendary El Dorado. Because just like Dali 2 and the lost city of Z, the mysterious land of gold is still waiting to be tracked down, if it really exists. In detail, the exciting myth is based on an old Colombian legend. In the culture of the Muisca people, it was traditional for each new ruler to offer sparkling treasures to the sun god. Even the king's body was covered with a paste of gold dust. Then the ruler jumped into the mountain lake of Guatavita with the treasures. By the time the Spaniards invaded South America in the 16th century, however, this rite had long ceased to be practiced. Despite this, the conquistadors were so impressed by the stories told by the locals that the greed for the almost unbelievable sacrificial treasure increased. However, over time, the legend would undergo some changes. Sometimes El Dorado is said to have been an overwhelming temple complex, sometimes a lost city in the heart of the jungle. The alleged location was also repeatedly located in other places. No sacrifice was too great for the adventurers to track down the mysterious El Dorado. Hundreds of them died of exhaustion and disease or starved to death. So, over the decades, it became clear that the search for the legendary land of gold was anything but safe. Due to the countless previous failures, the many fatalities, and the great financial expense, interest in the sparkling myth finally began to fade. So that at some point, no more expeditions were carried out. Only the future can tell whether El Dorado really exists, or whether it is ultimately a treasure, a city, or even an entire country. The Lost Labyrinth. In addition to the lost city of Z, there's another claim about a lost structure that stems from ancient Egypt. Admittedly, the claim that there's a gigantic hidden labyrinth in Egypt seems extremely daring at first glance. However, those who are convinced of the authenticity to this theory do not refer to their wild imagination, but to some contemporary reports. Above all, it's the explanations of the Greek historian Herodotus that have fueled the labyrinth thesis for many centuries. Herodotus once told of a building that was mightier than anything he'd ever seen before. In fact, the historian claimed that all the edifices of his people put together were less magnificent than the labyrinth. Even the breathtaking pyramids are nothing compared to this imposing complex. In detail, this oversized temple is said to have had more than 3,000 rooms. Far from simple rooms, these were places decorated with stunning paintings and intricate hieroglyphs. Admittedly, the reports of a single historian do not yet provide indisputable proof of the actual existence of such a facility. In truth, however, Herodotus was far from the only historian who immortalized the labyrinth in his explanations. The ancient writers Strabo, Manetho, Pomponius Mela, and Diodorus Siculus were also deeply impressed by the size and splendor of the labyrinth. Nevertheless, we find the most detailed descriptions of the building in Herodotus' histories. The only surviving historical work of the ancient Greeks consists of 9 books that were written in the 5th century BC. Herodotus explains that the complex has 12 courtyards and 6 gates, each on the north and south sides. The entire building is framed by gigantic connected wall. Regarding the more than 3,000 chambers, the historian says that they're divided into 2 types: underground and above-ground rooms. The historian saw the upper rooms with his own eyes, but he only heard about the underground chambers. For Herodotus, a visit to the complex was tantamount to an overwhelming dream journey. Each individual chamber in its own way offered cause for awe. Covering the labyrinth was a massive stone roof, which, like the walls, was bristling with carved decorations. Each of the 12 courtyards was surrounded by brilliant white columns. At the end of the labyrinth was another pyramid, 40 fathoms tall, which could be reached via an underground passage. For clarification, the historical length and area measured of fathoms corresponded to the span between the outstretched arms of an adult man. Transferred to our modern dimensions, a fathom measured about 1.8 meters. So folks, now your opinion is needed. What do you think of the exciting stories and lost cities we've brought to you today? We're already looking forward to your comments. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe so you never miss another video. Finally, feel free to take a look at the other posts on our channel, which you can access by clicking on one of the pictures in the credits. Thank you for watching, have a good one, and see you next time.